My name is Ryan, and this happened when I was working delivery for a fast food restaurant during college. I took the job because it paid better than the counter and let me drive around at night instead of standing under fluorescent lights for 8 hours. The restaurant sat near a quiet residential street on the edge of town, the kind of neighborhood where the houses all looked slightly different, but somehow the same. Same porch shapes, same chain link fences, same dogs barking at the same hour every night. Delivery work teaches you a route without you meaning to learn it. After a few weeks, I knew which driveways had potholes, which houses left their gate unlatched, which streets to avoid because the streetlights were out, and I knew the regulars. There was an older man a few streets over, late 60s, maybe older. I never saw him clearly. The porch light was always dim, and he never came all the way to the door, but I built a picture of him anyway. Gray jacket, slow way of talking, always tipped in cash, always the same amount, folded the same way. His order never changed either. A number 6 combo, no substitutions, called in most nights around the same time, like clockwork. For close to a year, I delivered to that house more than any other stop on my route. It became routine in the way anything becomes routine when you do it enough. I stopped noticing the details because there was nothing new to notice. The porch light would already be on when I pulled up. The door would already open a crack, just enough for a hand to reach through. I'd knock once out of habit. Someone would say thanks from just inside, and I'd leave. I never saw more than a sliver of the hallway behind the door. Never really tried to. It was just a stop, one of a dozen a night. Then, one night in early spring, someone else answered, younger guy, maybe 30, standing in the doorway instead of half hidden behind it, which threw me off before anything else did. I checked the receipt out of reflex. Same address, same order, same name printed on the account. I asked, kind of automatically, if this was his order. He looked at the bag for a second, just a beat too long, then said yeah, and took it. I didn't think much of it. People move in with roommates. People inherit weird food habits. People just say yes to free delivery without asking questions. I drove off and didn't give it a second thought. The next week, same thing, same guy, same door, same order under the same name. The week after that, too. By the 4th week, I was curious enough to say something. Half a joke, really. I asked if he was the same guy who always used to order this before, the older one. He didn't laugh. He got quiet in a way that made the porch feel colder than it was. And after a second, he said he'd only bought the house the year before. Didn't know anything about a previous owner having a standing order. I laughed it off, said I must be mixing up houses, and left. But driving away, I remembered the account. The name printed at the top of every receipt had never changed once in all the months I'd been coming here. I didn't think about it again for a long time. Not really. It just sat somewhere in the back of my head, the way odd things do when you're 19 and busy and mostly just tired. Months later, on a slow night, I mentioned it to a coworker who'd been at the restaurant longer than almost anyone. One of those people who'd been there so long, nobody remembered her actually being hired. I told her about the account, the name, how it never changed even after the guy who answered the door clearly wasn't the same person. She went quiet, the way people go quiet when they're deciding whether to tell you something. Then she told me the name on that account belonged to a man who used to be one of the store's most loyal regulars. Ordered almost every night for close to 4 years. The order stopped after 4 years, and then it resumed like nothing happened. After a while, even when the orders were going through, the family filed a missing person report, and as far as she knew, nothing ever came of it. No sightings, no leads. The case just sat open somewhere, gathering dust. The house sat empty for a long stretch after that, she said. Nobody wanted to touch it. Word travels in a small area, even when nobody says outright why. Eventually, years later, it sold. I asked how she knew all of this. Not the kind of detail you pick up from gossip. She told me she used to run that same route, back when she'd first started at the store, years before I ever worked there. She told me about the last delivery she ever made to that house. She'd knocked, she said, same as always, and the door had swung open on its own, already unlatched, already wrong. Furniture overturned inside, drawers pulled out and dumped across the floor. No sign of anyone, no answer to her calling out. She stood there for a long moment before she went back to her car and called the police from the front seat, hands shaking too much to think about anything else. She never went back to that house again. Not long after, she quit the job entirely. Something about the whole thing had gotten under her skin in a way she couldn't shake. That's the part that unsettled me most once I sat with it. By the time the new owner moved in, years later, everyone who remembered the old order, the vanished man, the ransacked house, the co-worker who'd called it in, was long gone from the restaurant. The story just evaporated along with the people who knew it. Nobody currently working there had any idea an account with that name had a history at all. It was just a name on a screen, a standing order nobody questioned. I asked the new owner once, much later, almost offhand, how long he'd been accepting deliveries under an account that clearly wasn't his before he said anything. He thought about it for a second, like he was doing math he didn't want to do out loud. Close to a year, he said. He didn't explain why he'd waited that long to bring it up, and something in the way he said it made me not want to ask, out of curiosity. Months after that conversation, I pulled the account records myself. Still active, still ordering. Same name at the top of every receipt. When I was 19, I worked at a fast food restaurant in a shopping center just off the main road. The turnover there was brutal. People lasted a few weeks, a few months if they were patient, and then they were gone, replaced by someone else who'd last about the same. Nobody really got attached to anyone. It was that kind of place. So when people disappeared from the schedule, nobody thought much of it. That was just how the job worked. One of the cooks was a guy named Marcus. Quiet, kept his head down, did his job well, never started anything with anyone. The kind of coworker you worked beside for months without really knowing much about. He always took the closing shift. Said he liked the quiet of it. The back of the building faced a narrow service lot, used for deliveries during the day and trash at night. It wasn't much, just a strip of cracked asphalt wedged behind the building, boxed in on both sides by concrete walls, taller than any fence had a right to be. Whoever designed the lot clearly wasn't thinking about anything except keeping delivery trucks contained and noise down for the businesses next door. Electrical lines for the loading equipment ran along the tops of both walls, strung pole to pole. Nobody was climbing over that, not without getting seriously hurt trying. There was exactly one way in or out of that lot. Through the kitchen's back door. Nothing else. No gate, no side path, no gap in the wall. I know because I asked, later, when it mattered, and the answer was always the same. It was a dead-end box with one door. One night near closing, Marcus said he'd take the trash out. Nothing unusual about that. It happened every night, sometimes twice. He grabbed the bags, pushed the door open with his shoulder, and stepped out into the dark. The security camera above the door caught the whole thing. The way it caught everything back there, night after night. Most of it never watched by anyone. Bags in hand. Door swung shut behind him. Footsteps toward the dumpster. Out of frame for a few seconds, the way they always were. He never walked back through that door. Nobody noticed right away. People stepped out for a smoke sometimes, or just for a minute of quiet before the last rush of closing tasks. 10 minutes passed without anyone thinking twice. Then 15, then 20. Someone finally went to check, more annoyed than worried, expecting to find him leaning against the wall on his phone. The dumpster still had his bags sitting on the ground beside it, never lifted in, like he'd set them down and simply stopped existing between one motion and the next. The lot itself was empty. No Marcus. No sign anyone had been there beyond the bags. Management pulled the footage that night and watched it more times than I want to think about. The camera showed him walk out, clear as anything. No footage. Not from that camera. Not from the one over the front counter. Not from the one covering the parking lot. Showed him walking back in, or climbing anything, or leaving through the front. There was simply a gap where he should have been and wasn't. Police reviewed the same tape when they got involved, and came to the same dead end everyone else had. There was nowhere for a car to reach that lot. The walls were too high and too close together, and the wiring above made even the idea of climbing them a bad one. It was, by design, a space with only one way out, and the tape showed him going in, not coming back through it. His car sat untouched in the front lot overnight. Then for days after, his apartment, when someone finally checked, still had everything in it. Nothing packed, nothing missing that anyone could tell. The case went cold quickly, the way these things sometimes do when there's nothing left to follow. For a few weeks afterward, his name just sat on the printed schedule taped up in the back, like nobody had the heart to cross it off. Or maybe like nobody wanted to be the one to admit he wasn't coming back. To this day, nobody who worked there during that stretch can explain the footage. I've thought about it more than I probably should, turned it over more times than it deserves. All anyone really agrees on is what the tape shows. A man walking into a space with exactly one way out and never walking back through it.
This happened during my second year working overnight shifts at a fast food restaurant that never closed. Overnights were slow in a specific way, long stretches of nothing broken up by short bursts of the drive-through getting hit all at once, plenty of time to notice small, repeating things. The overnight shift is where you learn a store's quirks, the way its ice machine groans at 2 a.m., the way its phone rings a certain way when it's a wrong number. I hadn't been there long when I started noticing the calls. They came during the dead hours, always, never during a rush. The same voice every time, calm, unhurried, almost polite in a way that felt slightly rehearsed. He always asked for the new manager, nothing more specific than that, just the new one, whoever that happened to be. The first time it happened, I told him we didn't have anyone matching that description, and asked who was calling. "Tom," he said, and hung up before I could get another word out. I figured it was a one-off, a wrong number, a prank, something forgettable. It wasn't. The calls kept coming. Different nights, different weeks, sometimes months apart, and then suddenly 3 in 1 week. Always that same voice, always the same 2 words, the new manager, like it was the only phrase he knew how to say. What I noticed eventually was that it wasn't really about me. Every manager who took the overnight position after me got the same call, sooner or later. It became one of those things people mention to new hires in passing, half joking, "Wait till Tom calls for you." Someone finally told me, offhand, that Tom used to manage the place, years before my time. Nobody offered more than that, and I got the sense early on that asking too many questions about it wasn't really welcome, so I let it go. It became background noise, like the ice machine. Then, one stretch, the calls just stopped. No last call, no explanation. They simply weren't there anymore, and it took weeks before anyone even noticed the absence. Around that same time, things started happening with our current manager, Nick. It started quietly, a couple of odd questions from corporate, a visit from someone who didn't introduce themselves fully. Then it wasn't quiet anymore. Word got around that police believed a product was moving through the store that had nothing to do with the menu, packages going out folded into delivery orders, routes that didn't match up with actual addresses. Nick was questioned for weeks, pulled in more than once. In the end, they never charged him, never had quite enough to make it stick, from what any of us could tell. But during all of it, Tom's name kept surfacing. In old delivery logs nobody had looked at in years, in supplier paperwork buried in a back office, in accounts on the system that predated anyone currently working there. The problem, the part that never sat right with anyone, was that Tom had been missing for 2 years by the time any of this came out. reported gone, never found, no activity on any account under his name since the day he vanished, according to everyone who'd looked into it. So there were really only two ways to read it. Either he'd disappeared for real, years back, and someone since had simply been using his name to move things through the store without anyone questioning an old, half-forgotten account. Or he hadn't disappeared the way everyone assumed, and something else, something nobody wanted to say out loud, had gone wrong somewhere along the way, long before Nick was ever a name anyone knew. Nick was cleared eventually, nothing on paper, nothing that held up. No real explanation offered to the rest of us beyond a short meeting and a request to move on. He didn't stay much longer after that. Transferred, or quit, I never got a straight answer, and stopped asking. Tom was never found. Every so often, months apart, someone still puts up a missing poster for him downtown. Same photo every time, faded a little more each round. I've stopped and looked at it more than once, standing there a little longer than I mean to. The phone hasn't rung with that voice again. I still don't know if that means something finally settled, or if it just means nobody's picking up anymore.